Both of us first got interested in true crime not through podcasts, but through books. And one of the best true crime writers working today is Gregg Olsen. He's produced many terrific titles. The first of his books that I read was Starvation Heights, an incredible true story of medical murder that happened back in 1911. We recently got a chance to talk with Gregg about his career, how he researches his books, and his newest title, American Mother, which tells the true story of a troubled family who is at the heart of a cyanide murder case.
My name is Anya Kane. I'm a journalist.
And I'm Kevin Greenlee. I'm an attorney.
We first connected while looking into the Burger Chef murders, an Indiana cold case. Together, we built a spreadsheet documenting hundreds of cases of restaurant-related homicides. That original spreadsheet gave way to our podcast, The Murder Sheet.
Now we maintain that same research-centric, investigative approach as we look into all sorts of homicides, including unsolved cases, historical crimes, and, of course, restaurant murders.
We don't just chat about the headlines. Our podcast is a platform for our journalism. The Murder Sheet focuses on investigative reporting, thoughtful analysis, thorough research, and in-depth interviews.
We're The Murder Sheet.
And this is A Conversation with Gregg Olsen.
Thank you so much for talking with us. Really excited.
Oh, for sure. I'm glad to be here.
But yeah, no, we're really delighted to talk with you. Read the book, loved it, and can't wait to sort of dive into, the case and also just your process in writing it.
Absolutely.
Can you tell us about the new book?
Yes. Let me crack open a beer first.
Okay.
It's really not a beer, it's a Coke. All right. Yeah, no, American Mother is the story of Stella Nickel, a woman from Washington State that decided that her life wasn't exactly what she wanted it to be, that she wanted more. And she was in a marriage that had been good for a while, but when her husband Bruce quit drinking, she suddenly found herself bored and wishing she had more, all of that. And so what she decided to do was kill her husband. What we all decide to do, right, when we're bored, kill somebody. The idea of the murder was really a means to an end. She wanted to get insurance money. She wanted to get something that would fund her big dream. And her big dream was, by all accounts, a small dream, I think, which was she wanted to open a tropical fish store. So she was going to get the money from the insurance company, and her life would be set. Her life would begin anew. But there's a lot more to that. I mean, do you want me to go into more, or?
I just want to maybe kick off also asking you, you've been reporting on this and telling this story for a long time. And can you talk us through sort of you kind of got into that at the end of American Mother, but can you talk us through your journey as an author with this story?
Right. I mean, this story originally was my second book. So published some almost 30 years ago. When you think about it, it's a long time, but it's one of those stories that really stuck with me. I mean, I think any story does stick with me that I work on for a couple of years. And I'm sure that's the case with you all too. It's like you get hooked on certain things that you pour your heart and soul into, right? You really want to know like what happens at the end. And the funny thing about writing a book is that the end really isn't the end, because the story continues when you finish that last word. So when you write the end, it's not so. In the Stella Nickel case, I had a lot of wonderings about people and what might have truly happened for her to do what she did. And I felt, I worked hard on that book. I mean, you can tell I talked to everybody. I mean, I talked to them all in person. I talked to Stella Nickel in prison, I think 4 times, when we wrote back and forth. So I felt like I really talked to everyone involved in the case, the FBI, the local police, the Snow family who would later come into the story. I mean, I talked to every single person. I turned every rock. And yet at the end, I was still dissatisfied. I really didn't know if it was Stella who had done the crime or Stella and another person. And that would be her daughter, Cindy. I always wondered about that because, when the trial happened and when Stella was convicted of her bizarre murder, she went off to prison and her daughter got, a $250,000 reward for her testimony against her mom. And that's kind of, like, it always troubled me. It always made me think about, why would she turn against her mother? Was it because of the money, or was it because of another axe to grind, or was it because it was to save herself?
And one thing that really feels like it's at the heart of the book is like fraught relationships between mothers and daughters in particular. And can you sort of speak to that and that pattern that kind of keeps coming up in this story?
Right. I mean, I think the thing about all of my books, all of my true crime books are all about relationships. And, there was a murder. To me, it wasn't the murder that's the focus, because I think what readers really want is you want to be inside of a story. You don't want to be just, you've already read articles about the cases that you're podcasting about, or a writer's already read articles, or a reader has seen it on TV, or, we all come with a bit of knowledge about what we're going to learn more about. So with Stella Nichols' case, it was one of those, that it hung with me because there was still some more to find. And to make that, to circle back to the relationship aspect, I feel like that's what we really want to know. We want to know, why do these things happen? How do they happen? But the why is really important. And the why to me is always about, it's always about relationships with people. I mean, every book I've ever written, and the person that is the perpetrator is somebody who starts that journey in their life very early, maybe even before they're born. And that where you're born and who you're born to and the home you grow up in really dictates a lot of what your life experiences are, right? Totally. And also dictates the path you're going to take. So somebody like Stella Nickel, and her whole family situation, even with her own mother, you find there's this pattern of abuse. Okay. Well, not everybody who abuses, gets abused, kills. But here's Stella, who is in 2 house fires. She's burned badly in one. She sits at the breakfast table one time while her brother gets thumped on the head and dies, her little brother. She ends up getting pregnant at 13. She said it was a gang rape. When you think like all of these traumatic things, and there's so many of them, do we have enough food to eat? No, we don't. So maybe mom's going to have to be a prostitute. I mean, when you think about it, it's like, though, that's the kind of story this is. And I think a lot of folks, whether it's, a serial killer or somebody that is a school shooter or something, I think if you dig back into their beginnings and how they related to other people and how they saw themselves, really has it's that roadmap to disaster, and you can see it clearly when you look back.
Absolutely. And like the idea of secret keeping, like one thing that fascinated me, that so many of the figures that you spoke to sort of seemed very angry at Cindy for basically telling on her mom. Like, how could you turn on your mom like that? And it's like, well, it's a murder case. Like, right. But it's like that core relationship that you have with your mother, I think, is like sacrosanct. And here's a very extreme, obviously, situation where you have people not understanding why somebody would choose to sell.
Yeah, and it's hard. It's like there's a code that, some of these people have, and maybe we all have it within our lives. Like if I saw somebody, a child being hurt or molested or whatever, I would say something, but maybe somebody else wouldn't because of whatever happened to them in their lives, right? So it's like, what is that code? Cindy told me later at the very end, she told me that if my mother had only killed my father, my stepfather, Bruce, I wouldn't have told anybody anything. That was her code. It's like, but she took murder outside the family, which is something we should loop back into about what really happened with the crime. And I'm happy to go over that when you
Yeah,
guys are
please jump into it.
Please do.
All right. So here's the thing. Stella, like I said it up at the top, she was wanting to, get a better life, get rid of her husband, get the money, and start over. And she looked at all different ways, and she discussed these ways with her daughter and other friends even. Could she shoot him and pretend it was a burglary? Could she have him run over with a car? Or could, I mean, it's like all these different ways that, she's weeding through the ways. Could she poison him? She thought about that. She even put like poisonous toxic seeds into his iced tea one time, but it didn't really do anything. And then she came upon the idea of those Chicago Tylenol killings that had happened years before. And Stella looked at that and thought, this is a winner. I've got, no one will know who did it. I can also get some extra money by suing the drug makers. So that was her plan. She thought, okay, I'll poison Bruce and, give him this medication. And then, when he dies, they'll find out it was cyanide, which is what she put in those capsules. And then I'll call the authorities and let them know that I think my husband died of cyanide poisoning. Okay, but here was the problem with her. She did that, and the medical examiners didn't catch the cyanide. It's a very interesting thing about cyanide. It starves you of oxygen at the cellular level. It's a terrible, terrible way to go, but it's kind of unusual. And certain people have an ability to smell what that smell is of what cyanide smells like in the human body. And when Bruce was examined, they didn't smell it. They thought he died of emphysema, which he had. His lungs were in terrible shape. He was a smoker all his life. So, Bruce just died of a natural cause, which was disappointing to her, because with Stella's thinking, and this is a real good tip for any murderer out there. It's like, if you murder someone, it's considered it's an accidental death. Murder is. So if you have like a double indemnity or some kind of clause for accidental death in your life insurance, you can up the ante and get more money. And that's what she was really looking for too. She was looking for that accidental death, and she didn't get it. So she ended up, she or somebody ended up a few days later putting some more of those bottles that she had made on the shelves in the Seattle area. And a woman named Sue Snow, a mother of 2 daughters, she had a 15-year-old girl still at home. She had a habit of taking Excedrin every single morning as kind of a caffeine buzz upper kind of thing. And that morning she took capsules and she collapsed and died of cyanide poisoning while her daughter, was frantically calling 911, not knowing what happened. And it was because of a medical examiner that had that ability, which a tiny percentage of people have. When they did the autopsy and did the incision, that smell wafted into the room. And she said, I smell cyanide. And when she did that, it alerted the news media. And the news media came and started doing this story about a cyanide poisoning, which gave Stella the reason to call in and say, I have the same lot number and my husband died, 10 days before. And I believe that it might have been cyanide because he was perfectly healthy. So that was when she thought things were going her way.
It's insane to think that she could have possibly gotten away with it if she had just...
but the thing, it did not get her what she wanted. And Stella was a tough bird. She was not going to quit. She's no quitter. She's going after that fish store, that tropical fish store. And she's not getting, she's not going to have enough money to do that. So, she's all in. She's all in on her plan and her plot to get what she wanted. And to think about this, we can all think about this. It's like when it happened, in the late 80s, you didn't think about domestic terrorism. You didn't think about that somebody could poison our water supply or poison our food chain or do anything like that. Like that was not even in anyone's thought, so the idea of contaminating product to kill somebody, it puts her at the forefront of what would happen some 30 years later, where if you found a package that looked like it had tampered with, you're not going to throw that in a shopping cart. You're not going to open it, because now we know there are people out there that want to kill us. I mean, not because of Anya or Kevin that you've done anything wrong. It's just that, well, you're alive, so I'll kill you. That's what it is.
Right. And the whole Chicago Tylenol murders you mentioned, which are still, unsolved as far as I understand it.
Yes, that's right.
Huge mystery there. But, I having delved into the Seattle sort of, sequel to that, how do product tampering murder investigations differ from like the standard type of cases that you might cover? And like, what are the things that investigators have to do differently there? Because as you said, it's random. It's purely chance often.
I mean, that's what's so interesting about it. It's random, right? But here's what I'll tell you, even what I know about Chicago. There is an intended victim of those 7 that died. At least one of those people was targeted, okay? But it hasn't been solved, and maybe it will be later. They've suspected some people, but in an investigation like this, where it's unsuspected and we don't know who it is, it's a federal case. It's a big thing that talks about supply chain and food and all that. Where did that cyanide get into the system? That was the first thing they had to find out. Was it done at the factory? Or was it done, post-consumer? Did somebody buy it and take it home? Or was it somebody at the store that was mad about something? Who was it? And why did they do it? And in Stella's case, she kind of cooked her own goose on this one too, because she ended up having multiple bottles of cyanide tampered Excedrin at her home. She had 3 bottles and out of 5 that were found. So how did she have all 3 of those? She claimed that she bought them at different times at different stores. And the FBI chemists and everybody said that, hey, that's not possible. That's very unlikely that would happen, that somebody could be that unlucky. But back to your point about the investigation, it's a huge investigation. It's product recall. It's the whole idea of everybody scour your cabinets and see if you've got any of it, because anybody out here could be the next victim, which is what happened in the Chicago case. One of the, some of the people who died were grieving because somebody died in their family, one of those victims. And so they took headache pills and they died. So, it's like, we got to get this stuff out of the pantries, out of the medicine cabinets, and to save lives.
And I'm curious, we kind of touched upon this, but, Stella is this very determined character. She wants her tropical fish store and will do anything to get it. What do you think that her choice, and she was, taking time to choose what kind of mode of murder she was going to go for. What does the choice to make it a product tampering situation sort of say about her and as a murderer, as a person?
Well, honestly, there's nothing colder in my mind when I think about it. It didn't matter who the victim was. It wasn't even a person to her. It was just, that means to the end that we talked about. It was going to get her to what she wanted, which was that money for the fish store. So I think, I can see murders that happen where, it's a crime of passion and, or you're mad at somebody and there's anger towards somebody, even if it's ridiculously whatever. But the idea that you're just kind of playing Wheel of Fortune out there with anybody who, spins that wheel, they're going to end up, getting that poison and die. To me, that is really, really shocking and really unsettling to think that there are people out there who, who don't care about human life. Not at all. I get it if you hate your husband and you killed your husband. I get that. You were mad at him. I get that. But she wasn't even mad at Bruce. She was just bored. So what does that say? What do you think it says?
I mean, as a recovering alcoholic myself, like I'm 2 years into recovery, and the fact that he stopped drinking that prompted this. Not that he was drinking and out of control, but he was sort of getting his life together.
Right.
That's astounding to me. I mean, I guess it shouldn't be given what she went on to do, but that
right.
to me was like, wow, this is a person who really has a different set of priorities, I think, than most people.
She did. And here's the thing about that. It was a bar culture life for them. I mean, they like to go and hang out. That's what they did after work. And so like, if that is your life, and you don't, you're really abdicated responsibility for your kids. You're not raising them or whatever, with Stella, she was not a good mom. So when your husband all of a sudden is, gone off to treatment and then comes back able to live that sober life, instead of celebrating it, you're pissed off because it's no fun for you anymore, which is absolutely ridiculous.
Yeah, it's wild.
It says a lot about her, doesn't it? Doesn't it say? I mean, it's like the random thing that could be anybody, but it's also like, instead of being happy and celebrating a success on a hardworking man who, loved her. He loved her.
Yeah, my heart broke for Bruce reading it. And one thing I was really impressed with is you just managed to achieve this sort of novel-like reading experience where you're getting all these details and you're very immersed in the story, following along with it, but it's not sacrificing on the facts. And I guess how do you go about, like, you interviewed so many people for this, hundreds of hours, and how do you achieve that level of getting people to open up and really share the details that you need to sort of recreate this crime from all these different angles?
Right. I mean, I always tell people this. My process is, it has to be an adjudicated case. As a writer, I have to have it go through the system because it protects you as a writer. Like, you can call somebody a murderer if they've been convicted of murder or whatever. So it's all, and I don't want to interfere with any police investigation either, right? Or FBI investigation. So when it's all said and done, I do what I call like working from the outside in. And I mean, I talk to the people that are less important to the story. They may have appeared in court, or maybe they didn't. And I'm getting, like that circle tighter and tighter and tighter until I get to those main players. And by the time I get to the main players, they've already heard from other people that I'm talking. And I think they see that I'm authentically doing a good job, the best job that I can. And I've written several books where people, say, well, I know what the cop said and I know what the prosecutor said, but the way you presented it, I'm not really sure what happened or what was right, because I'm going to give you the story of, not the story that the courts want you to have, not the story the cop has, in mind for you to believe, but I really think their story is somewhere between the two. And the people that can give me the best representation are those who were in it. So I pride myself, really, my whole career has been about getting those people to tell their story. I love people like the neighbor, oh my gosh, it's like they're because they stand in for you or me, right? Or family members who, have that little tiny piece of the story. Maybe they weren't important in court, but they could be the ones that could tell me, like one guy, Cindy, who was Stella's daughter, one of her boyfriends, made out with Stella, and it was like, and I talked to him, and I talked to people that's like, that's not important for court, but that kind of tells me something about these people, right? That how reckless they are and how hurting someone else's feelings within the family group isn't important to them. I mean, it's only about what I'm getting right now, not even thinking about it. And then if somebody gets mad, then you're self-righteous. Well, you're such a bitch for, being mad at me for sleeping with your boyfriend. What a jerk. You know what I mean? It's like they turn it around. So I think that there's something about that kind of, in my process, I'm really looking for that stuff. I'm really looking for the fly on the wall, the person that can put me in that scene. I don't make up dialogue. My dialogue is based on the court record, for one, but also what people tell me they said at the time. And as the writer, you have to really, you run that through your own process on whether it's authentic and correct or aligns with what you think is true, because not everybody tells the truth, even when they say they are. You know that, right?
Oh, yeah. We learn that again and again.
Right.
I'm curious about your process when you do other types of books. I think the first book of yours I read was Starvation Heights, which is about something that took place over 100 years ago. You can't really work from the outside in and talk to people then. So how do you research something like that?
That was, and I moved to Alala, which is where that happened. On my first day here, somebody told me about, they knew I was a crime writer, and they told me, you got to write about our local story. And I kind of rolled my eyes or whatever, but I ended up getting hooked because, it was 100 years old, right? It was old. But there were still people left at that time when I wrote that book who knew Dr. Hazard, Linda Hazard, who was the murderer in that story. They were children at the time. 1911, 1912 is when the crimes happened, but they had met her, they knew her, they had stories to say. So I love that part of it. And what made that book really work was that the court records had all been preserved. And I went to our state capital, Olympia, and I went through, a box of stuff that no one had ever asked for, ever. And it was all, it was the trial transcript, it was the letters, it was the exhibits. And to me, that was like the framework for the entire story. When I wrote that book, there was no internet. So I had to go like to Minnesota where she lived. I went to different, places to do on the ground research, which I love doing. So for that book was very different in that there was no one there left from the time the murders happened. But I still feel like I gave a story that, through the eyes of some of those who were children, they could really give me a sense of what she was like as a person, And I love writing that book. I feel like that's one of the best things I've ever done.
It's a terrific book.
You mentioned the adjudication angle, and you mentioned the sort of like really diving into the relationships. Are there any other things that you look for in a case when that kind of ticks off your boxes and say, okay, I need to cover this as a book, and I could really delve into this?
I really try to do something also that no one else has done. So if there's a Jodi Arias book in someone else's future, it's not in mine because I already know those kind of things have been done. I am your advocate. You are the reader, and I'm going to give you something that you're not going to get anywhere else. That's everything for me. The other part of it is I'm looking for those pieces of a story that will raise an eyebrow or maybe even shock you a little bit. So I always tell people this, like the litmus test for me on a really good true crime book is, say you're at night, you're in bed with your partner and you're reading one of my books. You're going to turn to your partner and say, oh my God, can you believe what she just did? Or whatever, right? To me, it's like I'm looking for those, oh my God, moments that no one else knows. And I'm a believer that is what my responsibility is as a writer, is to give you that new stuff that you've never heard, and that you're going to whisper in someone's ear and say, oh my God, you got to read this book.
I'm curious too, you talked about all the research you do, all the interviews you do. Mm-hmm. Just roughly, how long does it take for you to report and write a true crime book?
Yeah, that's a great question, because it usually is about a year or more to research. Okay, that's like a pretty fair number. And then maybe a year to write. Okay, so now that time frame is shortened a bit because there's so much available at my fingertips that didn't used to be. Meaning that I can start like today, like say I'm doing a story on such and such murder. I can go online and I can request court records and things like that and have them in a week, where before I'd have to go and pay my $1.50 a page in person, right? Wherever it was like you couldn't do anything over the phone, let alone online. So that's shortened that part of the research piece. So I would say the in getting the story, you never know where you're going to go or what you're going to get. So when you look at the materials, it leads you like it's like that handkerchief from a magician, and they're pulling out. It's longer and longer and longer. You don't really know where it's going to end. And so some books have taken me maybe 8 months to research. The fastest book I ever wrote was a novel, and I did that in 8 days. So I mean, it's sort of like you don't know how long something is going to take you. But what I do know about the process is it's a job, it's work, and it's fun, right? It's all those things. So my process is really simple. I tell myself that I'm going to write 1,000 words a day. Well, the average book, mine are sometimes longer, but the average book is 100,000 words or 80,000 words. So I should get it done in 80 days, right? Well, the truth is it takes a lot to get those 1,000 words that you're going to put down. It takes a lot of effort, a lot of talking to people. So it does take longer than just the 80 days.
I imagine it's also difficult to find cases because now there is an internet, there's true crime podcasts, there's true crime on television. It must be very difficult to find cases that people don't already know a lot about. How do you do
right.
that?
Yeah, I mean, I've got, I wrote my book, If You Tell, which was a murder case from Raymond, Washington. And I was lucky because it had slipped under the radar. No one had done anything on it. And that was about Shelley Notek, who tortured her children and the people that lived with her. And it was, and I gave readers a story they couldn't imagine, right? And then I started working on the Doug and Donna Perry case. I don't know if you know that one from Spokane. It was a string of prostitutes were murdered, and it went unsolved for many years. And then they ran a DNA test of the semen, and like 10 years later, and got a hit. But the hit came from a woman incarcerated in Texas. Okay, how does that happen? Well, Doug changed his sex to Donna, he says, to stop the killing. He was killing these prostitutes. So I've been working on that book. I started that one before the pandemic. And because of the pandemic, and because I believe so much in in-person interviews, it's taken me a long time to get where I am on that project, So, and then no one's written about it because no one was talking, but some people have talked to me. And so I think that's going to be a very interesting book for readers to kind of get, into that story. See, you've never heard of that one, right?
No, I've never
Google Doug and Donna Perry, and you'll see it'll be good.
That is wild. And yeah, I'm curious in terms of, like the real people you talk to. It sounds like, from the kind of the ending of American Mother, that you're still in contact with a lot of the kind of main players of this case, and the daughters involved, and you actually even heard from Cindy. And can you tell me?
Hearing from Cindy after like all those years, Cindy, who I wondered about, and who I would also kind of say, like, I was not fearful of her, but unsettled by her, because I thought the way she was portrayed to me, she was really tough and scary, and she, took the money and was heartless and all this kind of stuff, because that's what all of her so-called friends in the book say, but anyway, when I talked to her on the phone a couple of years ago, we had our first conversation, and she was funny and, hard bitten, but I liked her. I thought she wasn't so awful. I'd like to see her. She had a reunion with her actual birth father and her brother, and she sent me pictures yesterday of the three of them together. So, I mean, I don't really have a relationship with her because I haven't met her, but we kind of closed that loop on Stella, and she doesn't forgive her mom, and she doesn't want to see her mom, but I'm feeling like I could go see Cindy if I wanted to. So that's kind of good.
Yeah.
I mean, I care about these people I write about. I want you to know that's like it's different for maybe in the news media when they come in and they do an interview, and then the person goes home and they're done. I think books have shelf life, or life, they literally do, in that people, can pick up a book. And I tell people when I'm interviewing them, I said, your kids are like 5 right now, but your kid is going to be 20. And maybe at some point you'll want to hand them this book, or whatever, because it's your story, in a way that is also kind of put together with other people's stories that make up the whole story. So you can see where you fit in. And I think that's kind of, I don't know what I'm saying, but you know what I'm saying.
Yeah, the context.
And staying in touch with people. It's like, it's a serious responsibility to have somebody give you the access to their heart and their mind and their story. I mean, think about that. It's really a big deal. And I always know that it says, to me, that it's about trust, and it's about not violating that. And I don't think maybe one or two people didn't like how they were portrayed in a book, and I'm sorry about that. It wasn't meant to hurt them, and I think about that all the time.
Absolutely. And I'm curious, I'm sure a lot of our listeners who are true crime obsessed are thinking, like, how do I do that? Like, how do you get into writing books about crime? And do you have any advice for folks who, might want to do that, or might want to try their hand at that at some point?
Yeah, I absolutely do. And I mean, you have to write what you love. And it says something about the three of us right here. We love crime, right? And we love it for all sorts of weird reasons, and also good reasons too. But a lot of people want to know why people do bad things, or how to spot behavior that might be problematic, or they just like to be scared or whatever, right? So I tell people, if you're listening to true crime podcasts and you're reading true crime books or, watching forensic files, and you have this idea that you want to write, then you should. And here's how you do it. It starts with doing it every day. People don't get that. It's hard. It's fun, but it's hard. Like, it's work. So I tell, people, like, every day, if you're writing a story and you've picked the story you want to tell, then don't let yourself down. Don't let yourself down. What you need to do is write. Maybe it's just a sentence that day. Maybe it's a paragraph, or maybe you set a goal for yourself for 10 pages or whatever it is. It's like you got to do it every single day, because I think it's a discipline that will come naturally once you get into it. But it's really easy to say, oh, I don't feel like doing it today. Well, then you're not serious. Be serious about it, because you're drawn to it. So, and if you want to write about it, then you got to do the work, and you will be successful if you get to the end.
Why do you suppose people are so interested in true crime?
It's like I said, I think people really, they're interested in the shock of it all. They like it. Some people see it as an entertainment. Some people see it as, all my readers, almost all of them really, Kevin, are female. That's probably 95%. And I think it's because women and gentle men are fascinated by the idea of somebody doing something so against whatever they would consider. That, you hold a baby and you think, oh my gosh, this baby's cute. And you can't imagine somebody holding a baby that's thinking, okay, should I put it in a trash can? It's like, or whatever. There's something about that, where I think that people are really drawn, readers of true crime and consumers of true crime, whether it's podcast or whatever, I find are the gentlest people, the kindest people.
Yeah. Like
I'm serious.
They don't understand it. Yeah.
You just can't even believe it. So you're into it. And I think that's a good thing.
Another thing I find interesting about you is that you not only write true crime, but you branched out into writing novels. What led to that?
Well, there was a downturn in the true crime readership about, 10 years ago or whatever, before this big boom happened. Like, I started writing in the 90s, true crime, which I consider the golden age of true crime writing. If you want to say it's the golden age of crime podcast is now, but back then, every writer, reporter who worked for a newspaper, if they were covering some halfway interested crime story, they would jump on it and write a book. There was a lot of that back in the 90s. But then it sort of got to where TV was, Dateline and all those other shows were really coming into their own and kind of cannibalizing the content. So I switched to fiction, and I'm so glad I did. I mean, I love it. It's freeing. It's all crime fiction. So it's, I'm drawing on experiences that I've had or people that I've known or crimes that I've worked on that didn't really go anywhere, because that's what writers do. We use everything we see in our projects. So I switched to fiction, and then lo and behold, I missed the true crime stuff. So I came back to it and found that the audience had returned too, and the audience was getting younger instead of older, which is a dream, really. I mean, seriously. And the rise of audio, that's another thing. Audio for a crime book, I sell a lot of audio books and all audio downloads on those books, because younger people, they have a different way of consuming their content. And that's, audio has, just like a podcast, it's changed the way people, engage in what they're interested in.
You said you once wrote a novel in 8 days. How do you even do that?
I don't know. My arms were like hurting. It's just that it was a 70,000 word novel, and I just was like in a manic mode, I think, at that time, and just had to get it done, and I did. I can't say it's not my bestseller, but it did okay. And and it's like, and it was sort of fun. It wasn't, there's a national novel writing thing, about that in November, and I never have done that, but I can see other people have. So, I might want to try that again. But yeah, it was like exhausting.
You should do
And I didn't tell you my best process is that for every 1,000 words I wrote, I give myself a treat. Okay, so I write at the beginning of the day. I write a list of things I want to do, like walk on the beach, have some gin, or even take a shower. Like, cause I like to start really early, so at every 1,000 words, I stop and do something, or eat something or whatever, and then I start right up again. And I mean, like that's it's like I'm a hamster on a wheel. I'm going to get a treat when I get that piece done. So like at the end, when I'm trying to get that last 100 words, it's like I'll just do anything, just to get the treat, to get that whatever it was, chicken pot pie.
That is incredible. And yeah, writing a novel that fast is very, very impressive.
That's right. With no drugs. I did not use
no drugs. There you go. Just treats. Yeah. Do you have any other questions?
Thinking about your novels and stuff, is it possible to get at truths easier sometimes in fiction than in nonfiction?
What I like about the difference about fiction is that you can tie things up a little bit neater, and real life is messy. And some people have, they've given me a review on Amazon about one of my true crime books, and they said they didn't like the ending. It's like I have no control over the ending, or they didn't like the language. Somebody used the Lord's name in vain or whatever. It's like, well, that's how people talked, and that's what they said. So that part, true crime is authentic and real, and fiction gives me that chance to, play with the story. I'm inspired by a true story usually when I write a novel. I wrote a novel called The Last Thing She Ever Did, and it was inspired by a little clipping I saw online about a person here in the Seattle area that had accidentally backed over the neighbor kid and killed the neighbor kid. And I thought about that. I thought, is there anything worse? I mean, could any of us do anything worse than to kill the neighbor's little kid? You know what I mean? Whether it's an accident or not. So I wrote a whole book about a woman who had done that, or at least thought she had.
I'm also curious, you talk about the research for one of these true crime books can take a year, and then you write it for a year. Mm-hmm. And so with spending so much time with that one story rattling around in your head, what happens to you mentally when you step away from that?
Yeah, people ask that a lot, Kevin. And the idea on that is, I have, people say, oh, you must be so depressed, but I actually feel like there's sort of some wind at my back and some urging from whether it's the family or the victims that are dead, even in my mind. I kind of play that game with myself that, I'm doing something good. And that, so at the end, I feel okay about it. I've written a couple of books my very first one about a little Amish kid who was murdered that have lingered in my mind. It's like it won't ever go away. And then I wrote about a mining disaster in Idaho where 91 men were killed. And that really, really got to me. But generally with the murder stories, I'm able to literally close the book when I'm done on the anguish and the hurt of it all. But it never leaves my mind that those people gave me that story. And I'm going to see it to the end, whatever that end is. And sometimes that end is the person that I wrote about gets out of prison or whatever, or dies. So, I don't, people say, oh, do you lose sleep over it or whatever? And the answer is not really. I've got stuff in my own life that make me lose sleep.
You say this is a case that lingered in your mind for a while after you initially covered it. And then you mentioned this case about the Amish boy. Mm-hmm. Is that a case you think you might revisit at some point down the road?
I actually am. That's the next book. And the book was called, that came out was called Abandoned Prayers. And it was about a gay Amish serial killer. Okay. Did you get all that? I mean, that's kind of the trifecta of wow. Anyway, his boy was murdered or found dead in a ditch on Christmas Eve in a little town in Nebraska. And no one knew who the kid was or where he came from. And I wrote a book about it. So, and I followed that father, the killer, everywhere he went, and did an exhaustive investigation, because that was my first book, and that's what I believed and still believe now is the way to do it, right? So I wrote that book, and recently, within the last year or so, back up a little bit, there were other deaths involved in the man's life. Okay, one was his wife. She died in a barn fire when she was 5 months pregnant, and it was deemed just a natural death, that she'd had a heart attack or something. But about a year ago, I heard from one of the Amish brothers of the woman who died, and and that's another thing. I'm connected to this guy. I knew him when we were both young. We were both in our 30s, and now all these years later, 30 years later, he calls me. Because now he's allowed to have a phone. So he called, not on his house, but it's like at the end of the road. So he called me and we talked, and I flew out there, and I got a bunch of letters and things that I had never seen before that really point to what I believe was a murder for sure. And I think I can prove it. And so that book is due at the end of November next month. And it's called The Amish Wife. And it's about going back, a little bit me in there, going back to my first story and trying to fix it by justice for somebody who never got any.
It sounds like an incredible book.
It will be good.
I hope you
won't be disappointed
talking about it with us when it's ready to be
done. Yeah, when you come out with it, we'd love to talk with you about it.
Absolutely. We'll make sure you get one.
Yeah.
And thank you so much for taking the time to talk with us today. I guess one thing we always like to end with is there something we should have asked you that we didn't ask you? Is there something else you wanted to talk about?
No, you guys were great, and you made me feel so comfortable. And I'm glad that we had this time, and I hope we could do it again sometime.
That would be great. We'd love that. Your insights were incredible, and we really enjoyed talking to you.
You guys are fantastic.
We want to thank Gregg Olsen for taking the time to talk with us. You can buy American Mother or any of his other books at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, or wherever else you buy books.
Thanks so much for listening to The Murder Sheet. If you have a tip concerning one of the cases we cover, please email us at murdersheet@gmail.com. If you have actionable information about an unsolved crime, please report it to the appropriate authorities.
If you're interested in joining our Patreon, that's available at www.patreon.com/murdersheet. If you want to tip us a bit of money for records requests, you can do so at www.buymeacoffee.com/murdersheet. We very much appreciate any support.
Special thanks to Kevin Tyler Greenlee, who composed the music for The Murder Sheet, and who you can find on the web at kevintg.com.
If you're looking to talk with other listeners about a case we've covered, you can join the Murder Sheet discussion group on Facebook. We mostly focus our time on research and reporting, so we're not on social media much. We do try to check our email account, but we ask for patience as we often receive a lot of messages. Thanks again for listening.